Friday, we'll be back on August, we'll get back on the 11th, like at midnight in Des Moines, so I'm not sure if we'll stay overnight or we're going to bring it home. Yeah.
Well, observations on the first service. I think in the chaotic political environment that we're living in right now, one important thing to do is to look at the worldview of what's being presented. Now, I'm going somewhere with this. All the examples that you pointed out, if we just elect this person, or if this were to happen, or if that were to happen, then everything would be all right. That is, the worldview behind that is an unchristian worldview, because what it assumes is that I'm fine. It's everybody around me that's the problem, or everything around me that's the problem. And if we elect this person or that person, and he can make those things go away, and we'll be fine. That is the opposite of what Christ taught, the controversy with the Pharisees over the washing of the hands. The problem's not the food, the problem is you. It's what's inside of you.
Yeah, that's a great observation of that. I appreciate that. I hadn't put it in that context, but that's really good. Yeah. By seeking the external to fix assumes that it's their issue, not mine.
And it's important to pay attention to those things.
Yeah, I think that's...
But I've seen too many people, be they on the right or be they on the left, with that same attitude of, well, if somebody could just fix this, then everything would be fine. Well, the problem is you.
Yeah.
And the only person that can kill the old Adam that is your problem is Christ.
Right, and I appreciate that's a great observation, so thank you. Just a couple of completely non sequiturs. Friday was July 19th, and I had an interesting thing. I was driving into Sioux City, and it was really kind of fun as we were driving over there. Lexi was in a play in Nebraska, so we were driving over there to see it. She wasn't in it, she was the choreographer, so we saw about 5 different crop dusters as we were going across the state. It must be that time of year when they're doing it. It was kind of fun, you know. It's always fun to see those. And, you know, Myron, are you still driving yours, or was that your dream to be a crop duster? Yeah. And it was fun, but Amy reminded me July 19th, 1989 was a very significant day. Dave, you know what that was? What? Anniversary of Flight 232, the plane crash in Sioux City, Iowa. And that, yeah, that was I was an eyewitness to that crash. I watched that plane crash in front of us. That was the day I moved into town in Sioux City, coming up I-29, and watched that plane crash. And it was 35 years ago on Friday that plane crashed. And so we were driving into Sioux City watching these planes, and those crop dusters are pretty low to the ground. And they fly right across the highway, and the image, now these are little planes, but the image of those planes, that's about the height of what that DC-10 was when it came across the highway in 29 and crashed in front of me. So I just had this flashback of that image. It had nothing to do with anything, but just kind of share that with you. Somebody posted on Facebook their memory of that day and had mentioned me in it. So that truth and reality, just where we're going with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was on a plane that was supposed to land right after that plane, and all of a sudden we did a really hard left turn and ended up going down to Omaha.
Really? So you were coming into Sioux City? You really? Oh my gosh! Wow! It's the way the Lord worked through that is kind of incredible.
Yeah, crop dusting has a bad memory in our family, because my uncle was a B-17 pilot in World War II, and he came home, and among his other jobs, he did crop dusting. One time, he crashed on takeoff. Of course, a full load of chemicals and fuel, and crashed and died.
Oh my goodness! I'm sorry to hear that.
Went through the whole war and done that.
Oh.
Yeah. Family of 6.
Oh my. It's interesting, you know, and we don't have a lot of crop dusters in Michigan, but in Iowa, it's just that there's a short window where you get to see them maybe twice a year, I think, when they go out. But it's on Highway 20. It was just interesting that we saw so many. And maybe it was the same one that just kind of kept going to the fields in front of us. But it's interesting to see those, and it happened to be on July 19th, as I was coming to Sioux City to be ordained. That was on a Friday, and on Sunday was my ordination installation into the church in Sioux City. And so it kind of made me think of that. So Today is my 35th anniversary of my installation ordination as a pastor. And I didn't think of that till just this very moment. I was thinking about the plane crash, but I guess today I've been a pastor for 35 years. So I'm still trying to figure out how to do it. When I get it right, I'm going to quit. I guess it's going to be here a long time. You're stuck with me. Anyhow, we're going to continue on with John chapter 18. Moving on to, we're now getting into the official passion, if you will, of our Lord. Somebody want to pick up? We're going to just, I think, go through as far as we can. Somebody want to read from 18 verse 1 and following? All right, Tyler, you're up front. You're close to it. You got good eyes.
So what verse?
Verse 1.
When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Cedar, where there was a garden, and he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place where Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, "Who do you seek?" They said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, "Well, I told you that I am he, so if you seek me, let these men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "Of those whom you gave me, I have not lost one." Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drawing, struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said, "Put your sword in its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given?"
I'm trying to figure out how to get this.
Me?
Period. It's just me. All right. We'll just stop right there for the moment. All right. We've kind of moved into out of the high priestly prayer into the events that lead up to his passion, where it starts here. He went with his disciples across the brook Kidron. That's that valley. When you see the images of Jerusalem, you kind of see the Temple Mount. Today you see the Dome of the Rock, that golden dome. And normally that picture is taken from the Mount of Olives. It's taken from the area of the Garden of Gethsemane as you look across to it. And so the east wall of Jerusalem, that's the picture that you see in almost all the pictures. That valley that's below, that's the Kidron Valley. And it's normally dry. The only time that there's water in that Kidron Valley is during the rainy season, and that's usually November, December. So this is spring, so it would be a dry valley. So they come down. The distance is quarter mile, half mile, but it's kind of a steep little down and up into the valley. So that's kind of where they're coming through that area into this Kidron Valley, into the garden, where he's with his disciples. Now Judas, who had left the dinner, had betrayed him. He knew the place where they're staying. There's a lot of discussion around this. They're going to the area of the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Garden of Gethsemane and the Mount of Olives are really kind of mushed together. There really isn't a lot of distinction. Now today there is, but in those times it was probably just one a grove of garden tree or olive trees, and then in one section there was a special little gardening area, and so it's this whole section. The olives are harvested during that spring rains, during those winter rains of November, December. And so the harvest has been taking place. It's not at all uncommon that visitors to Jerusalem, especially during the festival seasons, the 3 or 4 high festival seasons, would camp in these olive trees, and the owner would, if you knew the owner, or maybe even rent them out, but generally they would just allow you to go up and camp during that area, and they would make their pilgrimages into the city. So this is not an uncommon reality, and so it's suggested that Jesus and his disciples, he'd come into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday and returned back to Bethany that day. But from the rest of the week of Passion Week, he had stayed in the Mount of Olives and probably had camped with his disciples in the Mount of Olives. So Judas had been saying that they'd set up camp there. So this is why he probably knew this is where they were staying. And then again, there's a lot of speculation, but most people suggest that this is probably why he knew this is where he'd be. Each night they had gone back, and this is where they were staying. They hadn't gone all the way back to Bethany, and this was a pretty good. It's suggested that either Jesus or somebody knew the owner of this olive grove, and that's the area they're staying. Kind of the same way that he knew when they were going to the upper room to celebrate the Last Supper. Jesus sent the disciples ahead and said, go there, you'll find a colt and donkey, or you'll find a man with a room and say, we need to use your room for the celebrating the Passover. In the same way, he said, there's, it's speculated that, we're going to stay in this place. So it's kind of the campground speculation. So Judas had known that they were going to stay there with his disciples. Judas had procured a band of soldiers and some officers. Now, the band of soldiers here is from the cohort of Jerusalem. A cohort is about 600 soldiers. And it's suggested that some of the officers would have been the chief officer, the sergeant in charge, or the lieutenant, whoever was the chief officer of this band of soldiers. They would not have taken just a handful. This would not have been a small platoon. The number they're talking about that I've read in several of the commentaries, it's suggestion that they know that Jesus had some disciples. This wasn't just his apostles. So they're talking, Jesus had gathered quite a number of disciples. They would have taken an overwhelming number of force to arrest Jesus in this garden, especially if the garden had been used as kind of a campground for people who had been coming in and out of the city for the festival season. Remember, this is Passover. There were lots of people around, even though it's at night. So the number of guards who had come to arrest Jesus would have been 100, 200. So this wasn't just a small band that had come to arrest him. That's just the temple guard. That's just the Roman guards that had come to him. Now, in addition to that, they also brought the temple guards. These were kind of like your, I would even call them the National Reserve, because you've got kind of the professional Roman soldiers. These are the temple guards, the Jewish guards. So you've got a big band of military or professional fighters that come to arrest Jesus. So the image that I'd always kind of kept in my mind was that, Jesus is there, and you got a group of 10 or 15 heavily armed men that come in to arrest him. But this was not a small group of people. And we want to keep in our mind that this was a large group, and this was a overwhelming force that were coming in there because they didn't want a riot. They wanted to intimidate Jesus and his disciples, because remember, what was the reason they didn't arrest him in the temple when he was up there in the temple? Because the people believed and trusted him that if we did, there would be a fight and a riot. And so if we can overwhelm them with force and surround them with people so that there's not going to fight back. And so the suggestion is that this was a number of more than 200 soldiers who had come to arrest him. This is a big group of people. And chief priests and Pharisees were there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So they've got their spears, they've got their swords, they've got their knives. They come out there ready for war. All right, that's the image that we have in mind of Jesus. I don't know if that's the image that you always had in mind, but it's not one that I always carried with me.
It's consistent, looking back a few weeks ago when we talked about after raising Lazarus, the world has gone after him. Now, granted, in the week following that, the Passion Week, Christ lost a lot of public opinion, but it was still formidable enough, I think, where they felt they would have to have that overwhelming show of strength in order to guarantee success in their mission.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, we just think back, 4 days or 5 days from this event, we're talking, this is Thursday night into Friday. What had happened on the previous Sunday in this very same location? Palm Sunday. What was the significance? What had happened Palm Sunday? He'd entered like a king, the people waving the palm branches. So the Romans were already kind of on edge. They had heard about this so-called king who had come in. They were coming ready for a potential riot in this exact physical location. So they're back up. The Palm Sunday had come down from the garden of, or the Mount Olivet, so it'd come down this exact same location. They were going back up there. So they had come prepared for battle. They were kind of on high alert. So that's the image that we have to have. This wasn't just kind of some guys coming in peaceful saying, hey, Jesus, come on in. We got to ask you a few questions.
I think your first remark about them trying to intimidate him was probably a good part of it, because read Paul Meyer's book on Pontius Pilate suggests that Cedar in Rome had told Pontius Pilate, keep peace with these Jewish people.
Absolutely.
At all possibility, at all times possible.
Yeah,
No
and
war.
yeah, Pilate had already been kind of backed into a corner several times with the Jews, and he didn't want to mess this up again.
Warren, what was the name of that book in Pontius Pilate?
It's called Pontius Pilate.
By Paul L. Meyer.
Yeah, it's a historical novel.
Historical novel.
Yeah, if you like historical novels, it's a great one. Paul Meyer has like 4 or 5 of them, but Pontius Pilate is one of his best. And all of this, he takes all of this historical. Paul Meyer is a church historian from this area. Takes all the historical documents, both the Romans, Christians, and other ones, and then fills in all the gaps with dialogue and events. But he uses the actual documents as the source documents for the history. Great, great story. If you want, in fact, I got a copy on my shelf if you want to borrow it. So it's a great story. But yeah, and it fills in the gaps. So this is kind of the image that we have to have, is that these guys came out ready for battle, and they didn't come out kind of in a small group. They came out in numbers and force, which kind of sets the stage for the next events. So the Judas comes proclaimed with a band of soldiers, some officers, some chief priests, Pharisees went out there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen, all right, he already has a foreknowledge, came forward, seeing this mass of men. He's speaking to the chief of this group, the head of the Roman soldiers comes forward, the colonel, if you will, and steps up. And whom are you after? Now, Jesus knows exactly whom they're after. Why do you suppose he asked this question? Why is Jesus asking this question? Because he's defiant, right? Because he's trying to be a tough guy. No, then why is he asking this question?
I'll make it clear, if nothing else, who are they after?
Clarify, possible. He's setting the stage for who's really in control of this event. They're not in control. He's in control. They come out there with this show of force. They come out there with all these people with their arms, their torches. They're ready, and he comes out there, and as soon as they identify, we're after Jesus of Nazareth, what's his response? In verse 5, I am he. There's Judas, who testifies that, yeah, you are him. How does he testify that he's Jesus? How does Judas confirm that this really is Jesus? He kisses him. He gives him his betrayal kiss. And then when Jesus said to them, I am he, what happens next in verse 6? They literally fall down to the ground. Jesus.
Is that ego and me right there?
I am, yeah. Ego and me. That's one of those last I am statements. Jesus is making the statement is you don't have any authority over me that I don't give to you. This is my party that you're just participating in. Now, that's my human interpretation, but, I said that arrogantly. He certainly didn't do it that way. But, in this sense, that your show of force is nothing. So he comes out there, and it wasn't an arrogant statement, who are you after? But he knows that this was necessary for the salvation of mankind. This was going to happen, but he was also letting them know that he was not going to be taken. How do we describe his passion? Did somebody kill him, or did he give up his life? He gave up his life, and it begins right here. It begins right here, that he gives himself up. Nobody takes him, right? And so that's where this dialogue begins, with Jesus as the initiator of the events, and with this wonderful statement. And I love the way it's described here. Now, we don't see it in the English but when in verse 6, when Jesus said, I am he, I am the ego of me, I am the one you're looking for, they drew back and fell to the ground. The Greek has the panta, the all. They all fell to the ground. So you've got this gathering of several hundred military men, heavily armored, in their swords and spears and military outfit, coming ready, prepared for a riot against these lowly Jews. And all that Jesus says is, I am he, and what happens? They literally collapse. Just at his word, they collapse. I can't even fathom what that must have been like. No, if you're a toughened, hardened Roman soldier, and you're sent out to arrest one guy, and you're the colonel, you're in charge of this army behind you, you are not anticipating that. There's no way you could have prepared yourself for some guy saying, who are you after? I'm after Jesus of Nazareth. He said, yeah, I'm the guy you're looking for. What happened? The closest I can see is and I don't want to give any credit at all to it, but those TV preachers, when they go, yes, and everyone falls over, yeah, that's kind of the image I have, you know. And I don't want to give them any credit to that, but that's kind of that picture, isn't it? Now, I think they're stealing Jesus' thunder, and I'm not sure that's real, but for Jesus it was. At the power of his word, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, right? That's what happened, this amazing thing. And what is the purpose, the intent of the people falling back? What is that statement making to, not only to the soldiers, but what is the message to us today? And maybe they did, but they still had a job to do. Yeah. Do you think when that colonel got up, and I'm going to use the term colonel, but that head of this military unit that came to arrest him, when he got up and says, and when Jesus said to them again, so he asked them again, whom do you seek? They finally kind of get up, they dust themselves off, they're shaking, they're looking around like, what happened? You know, they kind of reorienting themselves, adjusting their helmets, whatever they're doing. And so Jesus says, who was it you're looking for? And do you think their attitude is a little more humble this time? Not quite the arrogance that they had the first time, not quite. Whom do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth? It might have been not quite so bold this time. And when Jesus answers, like, I told you them, they're like, yeah, don't say it so loud. You know, I don't know, but, and then he answers this question in verse 8. I told you that I'm he. Why did he add the next phrase? So if you seek me, let these men go. Now, let's break that up and do questions. Why did he ask them a second time? He's already told them who they are, who he is. Why does he ask them a second time?
Set the scene because his power and authority had knocked them flat, so he had to do it.
Yeah, they were dizzy, that might have been. This is just a reaffirmed statement that nobody takes my life, but I lay it down freely. Nobody takes the life of God, but I lay it down of my own accord, right? This is his display of authority, right? This is the Lord giving up his life. Why? Why is he doing this? Fill in why he came, to what purpose?
To save us.
Exactly.
God on the cross to save us.
I'm doing this for the salvation of mankind, for you and you and you and me. And no one is forcing me to do this. No one is making me do this. I am doing this for you. And we're seeing that played out a little bit in the second half of the statement. When he asked him a second time, who do you come for? And he said, Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I already told you I'm him. But then he adds, then let these people go.
Is it because there's only one person with blood necessary to atone for the sins of the world, and so therefore the men that were with him weren't necessary for what's coming up next?
That's the theological answer. There's only one sacrifice necessary. But it's also to fulfill, what did he speak in what chapter 17, verse 3?
None of those you gave me are going to be lost.
Yeah, he just got done praying this in the high priestly prayer just moments ago before they left the Kidron Valley, right? He prayed in that high priestly prayer, Father, I thank that you've given me, and that none that you've given me have been lost. So he prays this. So the theological answer is there's only one blood that's shed that's for the forgiveness of sins. And the practical answer is that I said that I'm not going to lose any of those that you've given me. So it's both, isn't it? Yeah, powerful statements in this. By the way, the synoptic gospels don't carry all of this other dialogue. They've kind of condensed it down. No, each one of the gospels have their own kind of take on this. But I love the way that John just kind of gives us the fullness of this picture that the synoptics don't always flesh out the way that John does. Let's see. Verse 9. This was to fulfill the word that was spoken, of those whom you gave me, I have not lost one. So he gives all this. They're kind of like, okay, Jesus, sounds to me like you're going to go peacefully. All right, I'm Jesus. I'm going to go with you. Let these people go. Doesn't sound like he's going to fight. He doesn't say, hey, guys, come on. We can take them, right? No, they're pretty obvious he can take them because at his word, they all just kind of fell down. So there's no doubt about who can do this. He doesn't put up a fight. He kind of surrenders himself to their control, if you can say that. After doing that, Peter does Peter. What does Peter do? Peter, you just saw Jesus speak his word and the people fell down. Do you think he really needs your help? Come on, Peter. Peter does Peter. Why did Peter do this? He's impulsive. Why else did Peter do this? What did Peter say at the meal just an hour or so ago? If everyone else betrays you, Lord, I won't. I will die for you. He's kind of made that statement. He's kind of put it out there in front of everybody. Now he's got to live up to it.
I sympathize with Peter.
I do too.
In a lot of ways, I'm like him.
Really? I hadn't noticed yet. Oh, I know. I'm just kidding.
I mean, we all are kind of like that because if we're looking at the big theological picture, I guess, I'm just taking a guess at this, but a man is trying to insert himself into the salvation equation. You know, Peter is trying to insert his will on the situation and trying to make a difference that only Christ can make.
He is, but he's doing it ignorantly because he just doesn't know any better. Yeah, it's not an intellectual insertion. It's just an ignorance. Peter's being Peter. Peter's doing what all of us do. Peter loved his Lord. He saw his Lord falsely accused. And I don't know, I wish, I can say this honestly, I wish I would have had the courage of Peter to do that.
But then you'd be saying it's Jesus plus me rather than Jesus.
I know it, but sometimes I think that I would be too much like the other guys going like, I'm afraid.
I'm not sure if Peter had the courage. It was such a brash, instant reaction.
Yep.
Here's a whole bunch of armed men.
Now compare that to the other guy's action. When your Lord's being arrested, you ran away and hid. Which one would you choose? Which one would you want to Now, given the choice between the two, I wish I was more like Peter. Under those circumstances, knowing that both of them were wrong, I would rather stand up and fight for my Lord. Everyone else just ran away like a bunch of scared kittens.
The gospel doesn't tell us, though. I think it's God prevented this. We aren't told that.
I know, but I mean, talking from a purely human standpoint,
They could have all been cut down and all those
they all could,
were
but
in the process of drawing their own swords. Peter,
they said there were only two swords. In Luke's account, there's only two.
armed guard, as it
Oh, yeah, the armed guard, yeah.
slaughtered all of
Yeah.
Jesus' disciples.
So when we're looking at this from a human standpoint, given the choice, yeah.
It seems to me there's someplace else where Jesus told, or Peter asked if he should take a sword, not maybe here, but someplace else, and Jesus said, you don't need one, or you don't
find that in church because I can't think what you're thinking of either. I just think that from a human standpoint, too many times I wish I were more like Peter. And it may not be taking up a sword and cutting somebody's ear off, but maybe when I hear my Lord attacked, that I'm too readily easy to take the runaway and hide, and I don't defend him. I don't speak up for him. I'm afraid of causing an argument, so I just keep my mouth shut, or I turn away. And it may mean that I'm going to get in trouble, or it may mean that I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm afraid. And so what I'm trying to get to, and again, none of us there, and it wasn't, but I think I wish I had a little more Peter in me when it comes to speaking up for my Lord when it's rightful. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say, and I didn't say that very clearly.
Yeah, I was thinking if it was me, I'd surely, I would love for the Lord. I hope I could do that.
Yeah.
That's what my
Not, in ignorance, we all would have been wrong because it's wrong to do it. And I think you're theologically correct that we're trying to take salvation into sin. But from a human standpoint, I would have wanted to hope that I would have stood up for the Lord. And yet, none of us did. And so it's an interesting dynamic that you have Peter here. But what's really fascinating, Peter gets up and strikes off the ear. Now, this in itself could have set off a bloodbath. It very well could have. What prevented the bloodbath from happening? Remember, you got a band of angry soldiers who have been humiliated by the Lord simply speaking, "I am he," and they fall down. Now they're angry, and they ask again, they're a little on tension edge, and they see one of their own getting attacked. No, he didn't go for the ear. We had a pretty good expression of this last Saturday. The assassin wasn't shooting for the former president's ear, right? Peter was going for the guy's head. Maybe he's not a very good swordsman. Maybe the guy ducked. We don't know. But he sliced off his ear. So if I'm standing next to Jesus and I see somebody going for one of my men and they cut off his ear, I'm pulling and I'm going right for him. I mean, you've just started this. You've fired the first shot, right? There should have been a bloodbath. What stopped it?
Just what I said. The gospel doesn't say that, but God had a hand there in calming down the soldiers.
He did. It does say really clear. What's it say? Yeah. Jesus grabbed the ear and healed it right away.
Yeah.
It does say it. That's what stopped it. And you're right. God did it. His name is Jesus. Yeah. You're right. And in that moment, the instant Jesus immediately grabs the ear and heals it, and everyone went, or whatever they did. They may have been very well drawing the swords until they saw that ear healed. But that instantly, that healing, and then Jesus said, "Okay, they take me." And at that moment, everyone, turned and ran away, and the disciples all took off running. But the Lord fulfilled the promise that he's the only one that needed to be arrested. He fulfilled the promise that none of those would be lost. And this record of Malchus's ear being healed is a record of that Christ still is in charge. Remember, it starts with Jesus asking the first question, "Who are you looking for?" It's Christ who finishes this whole encounter with healing of the Malchus's ear. Who's running the show here? Jesus, from beginning to end. He's in charge. Nobody takes my life. I lay it down freely. And we see this in this whole thing. Now, in verse 11, Jesus, after healing the ear, turns to Peter, "Put your sword back in its sheath." And then he gives him this statement. I don't know if it's an admonishment or if it's just a statement of question. I think if you go to Luke, he actually admonishes him a little more. In Luke's, let's see if I can see here what it says. Do you not know that, are you able to drink the cup that I am drink? I think here, shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me to? He uses this idea of drinking the cup. Where has this idea of drinking the cup come from? Yeah, but think back just just historically in these events, we're just talking about hours and moments before these events. Where were they 2 hours ago? At the Lord's Supper in the upper room. And one of the things he said is, take, drink, this cup is the New Testament of my blood given and shed for you. And then they left there, they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where what does Jesus pray? Lord, if you can remove this cup from me. So he's making this connection, isn't he?
That's the cup he's talking about now.
Yeah, the cup of suffering. Yeah, the cup of suffering that he's about to endure.
Well,
And
it was an Eastern habit. If you commit suicide, if something's going wrong, you know, to save face, save your honor.
I'm not sure I would make the connection to a suicidal cup. I'm thinking the suffering cup, the cup of suffering, the cup of the passion that he's about to endure. You can't take this cup from me. The cup that he prayed that his Father would remove, but if it's not my will, thy be done. This cup of passion and death that I die for all humanity. This is the cup that he's saying from Peter. All right. This is the pan. Peter didn't have it in mind when he grabbed the sword. Peter was just being Peter. Peter reacting without thinking, which we all do. But he's saying, Peter, you don't know what you're getting into. This is the path that I came to do. This is what Genesis 3:15 has been leading for. This is why I was born. This is what Mary gave me into death for. So this is all where we're at. All right, so this is where it begins. I'll just see if we can get through 13, 14. So the band of soldiers and the captain and officers of the Jews arrest Jesus and bind him. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who advised Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Just an interesting historical note here. They arrest Jesus and they take him to Annas. Annas had been the high priest, and I think historically from about 6 AD to 16 AD. Then, now somebody check my history, but I'm just going from memory. His son, not his son-in-law, but his son was then the high priest after him. And then Caiaphas was the next high priest. So we're talking about he's twice removed. And then he had 2 more sons and a grandson that were all high priests. So the family of Annas had been high priest from like 6 AD to 66 AD. So this family of Annas had been running the high priesthood of the temple for just about the entire New Testament era, because the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And so there's almost a dynasty kind of mentality in this priesthood. Why they took him to Annas first and not Caiaphas, there's a lot of discussion and debate about that. He's twice removed from the high priesthood. He hasn't been the high priest for at least 2 generations. The general consensus of the scholars and the commentaries that I've read was just out of respect. Even though he hasn't been the high priesthood, he's kind of still the grandfather. He's still kind of now he doesn't control it. He doesn't have say over it. Caiaphas is still the high priesthood. He has the power and authority. But it's like just respect. Yeah, high priest emeritus. It's respect for his role. And they brought him to him. That also gave them time to begin the process of gathering the Sanhedrin. Now, the Sanhedrin was the 71 leading counts, 70 or 71 leading religious authorities of the Jews. It was against the law to have a trial at night. They had kind of abolished that, override that law for this particular circumstance. But they had to go house to house. This is the middle of the night. Wake these Jewish leaders up, get them together, get them to Caiaphas's house, wherever this was, and then set up the trial. And so while they were doing that, they went to Annas and simply said, hey, we've captured Jesus, and whatever they did there. And then they began taking him to Caiaphas for the trial. So that's kind of some background of where that came from. And it was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews it's better that one man should die for the whole people. Does that make sense? All right, so just a little bit of background. We will pick it up there in August when we come back. Any follow-up questions, comments, thoughts, or observations? All right, thank you very much. Let's close with a blessing. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with us always. Amen. Thank you very much. Have a blessed week, and I will see you when I come back.
Have a good trip.
Thank you. Pardon me? Spain and Portugal and Andorra.